I'm standing on some random rooftop somewhere in Poland, but that doesn't matter, because behind me stands a car that people claim to be the best in the world. During the development of this car, the engineers had a basically unlimited budget, because the goal was to create the perfect car. I present to you the first car ever made by Lexus, the LS400. The engine itself cost over $400 million to develop. And in case you ever wondered how $400 million sound, there you go. But is it really as good as people claim it to be? To find out, I'm going to drive 1000 kilometers in this direction. Welcome to Dugi Otok, the longest island in Croatia. Now, you may be thinking that I'm an idiot for buying a 30-year-old gas-guzzling luxury limousine from the 90s, and you're right, I am an idiot. But we'll get to that later, where I will explain to you why I actually regret buying this car. Why do people think this is the best car in the world? Well, it is the one reason it was built. It was built to impress a species of humans with high standards, too much wealth and high blood pressure. The American. Because you see, in the 90s, Toyota wanted to create a luxury brand that would compete with Mercedes and BMW. And to beat them in the American market, Lexus and Toyota had to build the perfect car, and it had to be cheaper than the competition. But did they manage to do so? Let's find out. The car looks so boring and simple that in fact you could ask an alien or artificial intelligence to describe what the car is, and this is what they would come up with. It looks like all the drawings I did in kindergarten. It looks like the default car of humanity, and this is what makes it so brilliant. Because you see, there are people out there that blame others for their failures, and sometimes they like to take out their keys and scratch your car 2 times. By accident, of course. To someone that doesn't know anything about cars, this doesn't stand out. It looks like an old boring Mercedes. And that's why, in my opinion, this is the most discreet way you can have a V8 engine. At least here in Europe. And now think, what do Americans like? V8 engines, rear-wheel drive, diabetes and automatic transmissions. I'm just waiting for this one guy that makes driving a manual his whole personality.
Automatic? Yeah, I drive a manual. I'm a real man.
Listen, nobody cares. Here in Europe, everybody drives a manual, even Babushka. Another important part of trying to attract Americans was luxury. Does this car have it? Oh boy, do I look like a bank robber to you? Obviously, there's so much more to discover in the driver's seat. One thing that makes zero sense is this, a cable phone. For you youngsters out there, it can also be called bungee brake. The problem is that it is forbidden to use phones in your car. But since we are here in the middle of nowhere, somewhere in Croatia, I will demonstrate how this works. Keep in mind that this, what I will do now, is completely illegal and you should not do it while driving. Anyways, you pick up the phone and press this green button. And since Mighty died in this horrible accident, I am here to replace him. As you may have noticed, I'm wearing those BDSM gloves to pretend that I'm Ryan Gosling. Why? Because this steering wheel gives me some weird chemical burn on my hands after driving for 15 minutes. But that's a small cost for the interior that is maintained so beautifully by the previous owner. He told me that he was refreshing the interior every year since he owned this car, and the results are clearly visible. In fact, I had to pass on other LS400s because of the bright interior. If you have a bright interior, fuck you. Honestly, who buys cars with bright interiors? Some LS400s came with air suspension from the factory, and I was lucky enough to get one that actually works, because most of them deflate like an old man's penis. The first generation of this car had a cool floating dashboard, but Lexus decided to remove it for some reason. I still prefer the second facelift generation because the steering wheel doesn't look like an old woman's purse, and the odometer doesn't look like someone with a face tattoo. It's completely ugly and out of place. I hope nobody with a face tattoo watches this video. In this car you can adjust the temperature by ½ a degree. Also, there's wood trim in places where it shouldn't be, because you needed something to talk about with your work colleagues. Obviously it has automatic air conditioning, which you will never use because it's either too cold or too warm. It is a cock and ball vent, heated seats front and back, traction control switch when you need to crash into a curb, headlight sprinklers when you want to make your car cry. The bottom display has some weird alien language that I don't understand. And of course the most important thing for a modern human that needs constant stimulation, the audio system. It has no aux and obviously no Bluetooth, so you are left with a cassette or CD player. Anyways, if you decide to use the CD or cassettes, there are 6 buttons that you can program. Mine are programmed like this. Number 1 is for simple cruising. Number 2 is for the most generic song you can put on to not be embarrassed when someone stands next to you on a red light. Number 3 is a no copyright song that is only 5 years old yet feels nostalgic. Number 4 is for sounds emitted by the planet Venus. Number 5 is for impressing 10-year-olds on TikTok.
I cannot take it anymore. Make it stop.
And finally, number 6, the throwing stones. Since this is a car that came out in times where the world was advancing quicker than a brain tumor after spending 5 minutes on TikTok, this car had to receive 2 sorts of radio signals. Short-slung signals and long-slung signals. I always wanted a car with a sunroof until I got one. It's overrated. The sun is shining in your face and it's just too loud on the highway. Maybe that's why Lexus called it the moonroof. Anyways, it is obviously electrically adjustable and it has a tilt function to let out the secret farts when driving with your girlfriend. Cup holders have this cool animation and are decently sized if you're a normal human being. And they are probably too small if you're American. The armrest feels really nice. You can put all the empty McDrive receipts and coins and gum packages in there. The phone, obviously, if you want to spontaneously combust. Side view mirrors, obviously heated and electrically adjustable, and the rear view mirror dims automatically at night, so you don't get blinded by the cars driving behind you. Something like this in the 90s? By the way, it took 1 month for me to figure out what this button does. I am a fucking caveman. The windshield wipers have a really cool feature. When not in use, they hide under the bonnet. Why? To help with aerodynamics and to help me extend this video to over 10 minutes. The trunk is decently sized. I mean, it should be for such a big car. People say it's too small, but who cares if it has 5 liters less than a BMW? I mean, does it get the job done? Yes. Market shopping with Babushka? No problem. Trip to an airsoft game with the lads? No problem. Disposing bodies in the river? No problem. No problem. Oh, the seatbelt buckets have a small light to help you find them. But they still can't help you to find any bitches. The steering wheel adjustment, if it decides to work, is electric and it retracts automatically when you take the keys out. But this one does it in a so stupid way that it goes down and it blocks me from getting out of the car. And this brings me on to the annoying things about this car. The electric door windows are extremely loud when going down, but super quiet when going up. Also, like in a new car, it is enough that you press it once and it keeps going down. But if you want to go up, you need to keep holding it. If you release it, it just stops. This is super annoying. The same with the sunroof. If you want to open it, you just press it once and it keeps opening. But if you want to close it, you need to keep holding it. And if you stop, it just stops. The seating position is really comfortable, but for some reason the roof is just too low, even for me. And keep in mind, I'm only 1.8 meters tall. Or in other words, not tall enough for Becky from Tinder. Even my Miata has a bit more headroom. I just cannot imagine using this car in a tactical situation. It would be just too impractical to remove your ballistic helmet every time you get in and out of your car. The headrests are adjustable in height, but again, they are too low. They would function more like a whiplash enhanced system, at least for me. While the air suspension is really comfortable, it gives me sometimes the illusion that I am losing control, almost as if I was floating on air. The size. Obviously it was my choice to buy a land yacht in a country where parking lots are made for dinghies. But it's still surprisingly maneuverable. The turning radius is really small, and this brings me on to things that I like about this car. Everyone I took on a ride said the vibe and general feeling of this car is just amazing. The engine is not only the most reliable thing in the universe, it also sounds really good. The engine was so smooth that in fact you could place a stack of wine glasses onto it, go full throttle on a dyno and it wouldn't fall down and shatter. But can this car do the same trick 30 years later? Now, I don't have any wine glasses with me, but I have something equally fragile. A Twitter user's ego. I love Japanese engineering. Of course, the one after 1945. This is my first car with a V8 engine, and I must say I'm very impressed, especially with the low-end torque. To someone that has never driven a V8 engine, just imagine the low-end torque of a diesel car, but it's just endless, it just keeps going. To keep up with other cars on the highway, in my Miata I would have to drive at around 4,000 to 5,000 RPMs. Obviously, with no air conditioning or sound insulation, you would feel like an old piece of pizza being warmed up by a jet engine. In this car, on the highway, you feel like a baller. It's just amazing. Even though it has only 4 gears, you can cruise at 3,000 RPMs at 150 kilometers an hour. As a car targeted to countries with low fuel prices, you shouldn't expect the economy of a 3-cylinder EconoBox. But it's still surprisingly good on fuel. And even though it has only 4 gears, this car can reach 265 kilometers an hour. And since this car has twice the weight of a Miata and air suspension, you would expect it to have bad handling. I must say that the steering feels really direct. You feel connected to this car. You don't get this feeling with new cars. And I can feel that the handling is bad. I mean, what do you expect? It's air suspension and almost 2 tons of Japanese luxury. The sound insulation is really good, and as a consequence, you cannot tell the difference whether you're going 100 or 200 kilometers an hour. It's not like the sound insulation matters, because you will be playing sad funk music at full volume anyways. Now, is this car fast? It feels quite good, 260 horsepower and 330 Newton meters of torque. Almost 4 times the torque of my Miata. Obviously this is not an acceleration monster by any means, but at least here in Europe it gets the job done. No Passat TDI will ever beat you on the lights. In fact, in the first week I owned this car, I was only pressing around 70% of the gas pedal. Do you understand? For 1 week I was driving at 70% power and I thought that was boring. I really am a caveman. Alright, enough boring talking. 13-year-old JDM experts told me that this car is slow and a Supra is better. Well, we shall find out. Let's do an acceleration test. Alright, let's put it in drive, traction control off, air conditioning off, launch control on, testosterone booster on, prostata massager off, balls scratched, cup holders retracted, and we are ready to go. Two seconds! Not bad for a 30-year-old car. And now for the brake test. 1.7 tons of Japanese luxury versus that kid over there. 3, 2, 1. Ugh. I didn't kill the kid. The brakes work.
So, what's the conclusion then? Lexus and Toyota successfully beat the competition and everyone lived happily until the end of their lives. And now to the second part of the title. Why do I regret buying this car? No, it's not a fuel consumption, and even though the prices hit hard recently, this is not something that I'm worried about. As both of my jobs, one of them being YouTube, I'm doing from home. The only use this car has for me is to cruise on the highway to visit family and occasionally drive in the city. I just feel bad driving it. It already has 280,000 kilometers on the clock, and even though there are plenty of them that went beyond 1 million, I still feel bad for putting on miles in a car that is this legendary. I know that in the US, those cars are cheap and widely available, but I kinda feel like the reputation this car has will make it an even more popular classic in a few years. I think I would have been happier with a car that I almost bought instead of this, a Volvo XC70. With that car, I wouldn't be so careful. I wouldn't care about it sitting in the sun, and it would be a car to solely get me from A to B comfortably and reliably, and not care about damaging it and putting on thousands of kilometers on the odometer. Conclusion? I bought the most reliable car to not worry about it breaking down. Yet while driving, I worry about breaking it. There's a saying in Japanese culture,
物のaware.
a bittersweet awareness that everything in existence is temporary. So maybe after all, this is just pieces of metal, leather and plastic put together without any feelings nor emotions that sooner or later will end up on a junkyard. Maybe it's time to stop worrying about things and just enjoy them while they last. Or maybe I'm just retarded.